Hello, everybody. How is it going? My name is Michael. Hopefully, you guys are having a positively fantastic day so far, and I'm here with an unboxing video. This is for Forbidden Lands. This is a pen and paper tabletop role playing game by Free League Publishing or Fria Lagan, a Swedish company. You guys might be familiar with them if you are in the tabletop role playing scene because they are the developers and creators of Mutant Year Zero, which is sort of their flagship game, which and a lot of their other games use the Year Zero engine, which is sort of what Mutant Year Zero is based on, obviously modified for different worlds and settings and all that good stuff. And so they have a pretty good track record. This was actually a Kickstarted game, and it was kickstarted in, I believe, 2017. And it was considered the third most successful RPG in the world to be funded on Kickstarter in that year. And as well as this got listed as one of the best RPGs of 2018 by Geek and Sundry, so it does have a pretty reputable record. I'm actually quite surprised not more people are talking about this one and playing this one, because yeah, I tried to look up like more actual plays and podcasts about this game, and there's a decent amount, but I do hope that more people actually record more actual plays and stuff like that about this game, because it's a pretty cool system. I really love the world, and honestly, there's a lot of stuff I like about this over Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll go over that. I'll preface this by saying I only took a brief glance through the Game Master's Guide and Player's Handbook, as well as I have not yet run this game. I will be doing that pretty soon, and maybe I'll make another video about sort of when I deep dive into that stuff and actually get a better feel for the game. But I did read a lot about this game, and yeah, I will be going over a lot of the optional stuff you can get with Forbidden Lands. This box right here is the core set. This is literally all you need to actually play the game fully, 100%. And yeah, everything else that I have here, I got with a bundle to sort of reduce the overall price of items. And plus, I wanted to support them, as well as, I like a lot of the optional stuff they have. They did a really, really good job on them. Again, entirely optional. I'll go over all the prices for each optional item, because you can purchase them separately if you want to just buy certain things on top of the core set. Additionally, I'll preface this by saying the freelagan.se website, which is Free League Publishing's main website, you can go there and actually download a free, I repeat, free quick start PDF for this game, which is like 150 pages, which will include ability to create characters, a little bit of game master info, as well as it will include an adventure zone called Weatherstone, which you can run with your friends. And adventure zones in this game are essentially like dungeons or larger locations where you will have your players moving through an area, doing things, interacting with the world, and it's its own adventure. And you can run that all for free to get a good feel for the game. So it's super, super awesome of them to have a quick start, because not every single RPG has something like that. So it's nice that you can get started playing this game for free to at least get a feel of whether or not you want to buy the core set. And Weatherstone Adventure Zone is one of the adventure zones that you get with the core set, by the way. So yeah, let's get started. I will be also listing prices for the main Free League website, as well as the Modifius website. And Modifius is the other company that actually helped publish this, and they're a British-based company. And I'll go through the prices for everything. So for the core set, which will include the Game Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, the game map, the Hex Grid game map, because this is a Hex Grid crawl style game. This is sort of like an old school style game in a modern package. If you're familiar with like OSR or old school Renaissance or old school revival type stuff, this might be up your alley. And I will be also comparing this a lot to Dungeons and Dragons, just because that's the game I have the most experience with as a GM and a DM, and as well as a player. And it's just, obviously the most popular one out there. But I'll read you the back to sort of so you can get a feel for the setting and the world about this game. So Forbidden Lands is a new take on classic fantasy role-playing. In this sandbox survival role-playing game, you're not heroes sent on a mission dictated by others. Instead, you are raiders and rogues bent on making your own mark on this cursed world. You will discover lost tombs, fight terrible monsters, wander the wildlands, and if you live long enough, build your own stronghold to defend. So you get the Player's Manual, Game Master's Guide, Legends and Adventurers booklet, which lets you flesh out characters and give them unique backgrounds, as well as for the Game Master to create legends on the fly. A large full-color map that gives you the freedom to explore the Forbidden Lands, hex by hex, and a sheet with stickers for adventure sites and gravestones, which will let you keep track of things on the map, as well as make your own stuff as a GM. So yeah, it's a low fantasy setting. There are some traditional things in there, obviously, that is included with any fantasy game. But what I like about this game is it's quite a bit darker and more brutal setting than Dungeons and Dragons. Additionally, they do take some traditional fantasy tropes and twist it on its head, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But we won't do we won't go through the Game Master's Guide and Player's Handbook yet. I'll go through the optional stuff first. But if you want to get the core set and just the main thing that you need to play the game, it's going to run you about $65 Canadian. And again, all these prices are going to be without shipping, but it's going to be about $65 Canadian without shipping. And on the US side, if you buy it off the Free League Publishing website, it's about $42 US. So yeah, obviously things are a little bit more expensive for us Canadians, but that's all right. I'm not going to be going through all the other currency types, but they're obviously on the websites if you want to. Again, the two websites that you can really get this stuff off of is Modifius, as well as freealagon.se, which is Free League Publishing's main website. I believe you can get it off Amazon, but I don't think you can get many of the optional stuff off there. I could be wrong about that, but as usual, Amazon, you can pretty much get everything. And again, all the stuff here is optional, and we'll go through it one by one. And yeah, let's just dive into it. So card deck. So this card deck, if you want to buy it separately, it's about $26 Canadian, or if you want to get it off off the Free League website for US, it's about $18 US. And the card deck, and also even though it's a Kickstarter game, you never know with Kickstarter games. Obviously, this company has a pretty good track record, which is probably why it was funded so well. But you know, with Kickstarter games, you never know in terms of quality when it comes out. But I'll say right off the bat, quality in terms of how much the stuff costs is extremely good. Some of the optional stuff is a little bit on the pricier side. Obviously, like, you know, $26 for just a deck of cards that's completely optional is obviously a little bit on the pricier side, but in terms of the quality, it definitely screams quality. And even the core set, though, the core set's obviously the best bang for your buck. I mean, around $50 for the ability to have hundreds of hours of content is just amazing. So what you'll get with the cards is you'll get an instruction card to just sort of let you know how the cards are used. You will get the close combat cards, and these are pretty interesting because these are an optional way to do combat. Now, the thing is, though, if you want to use the optional method to do combat, you do need these cards. So it's a little bit weird in that sense of having some stuff being required if you want to use this mechanic in the game, but that mechanic is completely optional. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually find the PDF for these cards online. I think they're on the Free League Publishing forums, but they're not easily accessible on like their main website, so it's a little bit finicky to actually get the PDF for this, but you can find the PDF for these cards online, so you can print your own. So again, entirely optional as well in that sense. But the idea behind this is instead of rolling dice to do traditional combat, you can actually have two deck of cards, one for yourself as a player, the other for the GM or DM representing the enemy, and you'll actually have a hand of these cards, and you will choose two of them and place them face down. And it's sort of like a rock, paper, scissors type thing, and like the ability to predict what your opponent might do. And it sort of represents the idea that you're having like this big epic battle and duel between your opponent, where certain things will trump other actions will go before other actions. It's a really, really cool style to do combat. I don't think that many people will want to use this for like you know, just regular combat and for every combat encounter, because this is going to slow down combat quite a bit. And the game is meant to be played, I think, pretty quickly. Because it's a much more brutal game, combat generally goes very, very quick. But these are, again, entirely optional mechanic. You don't have to do combat this way. I think I will use these cards, but only for like boss fights or like big epic style duels between like a main character and another main NPC or something like that, because it'll make things a little bit more interesting. But from just general combat to combat, I'm not planning on using those. Again, entirely optional. The next up is you will be finding a small deck of 10 cards labeled 1 to 10. These are your initiative cards. So this game uses cards to actually represent initiative. which is interesting. I think a lot of people won't be super stoked about this style of initiative. I personally don't mind it. I don't really care how we do initiative generally, and this is a nice simple way to do things. Everyone grabs a card. Lowest goes first. And there's no determined way, like there's no rule in the game to determine like who takes a card first. It's random regardless, so it doesn't really matter in that sense. Additionally, you can see on the edges there, you might be able to read it. I apologize if focus isn't that great on this webcam, but it does represent your fast action being used and your actions being used by turning the card. So it does have sort of a dual effect. But again, you don't really need to do that. It's not too hard to keep track of actions in this game, I feel like. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Again, since it's optional, if you want to in the game, it just says grab a deck of normal cards and get the ace to 10, ace being your ones, and you can use just regular playing cards to do the initiative as well. And if you don't like the card style of doing it, like this is the main way you're supposed to do initiative in this game, because especially considering there are talents related to doing this. Like, for example, there's a talent where you can draw 2 initiative cards and pick the best one. If you decide to like take a more traditional way to do initiative, like with the dice roll, you'll have to make some homebrew type stuff to modify it. And then last but not least is going to be your artifact cards. Again, you can sort of see how amazing the art is in this game. I love their art. I believe they hired a lot of famous Swedish artists and authors to help develop this game, and it definitely shows in the quality. Just super, super awesome art. And these artifacts are going to be what you're going to be using to sort of, they're going to be just special items placed out in the world that your players will obviously want to try and go find. Each one has its name, its flavor text, which is actually its legend, and its effect, what it can do in the game mechanically. And the flavor text and the legends are going to be what you're going to be placing in the world as like a note someone left behind, or like a rumor that an NPC will tell your players, and it'll help let your players know where this item might be in the world and sort of the backstory behind it. So it'll help influence your players in, like, maybe one of your players wants to find this epic helmet or whatever. You can look at the legend and sort of try and fit that within your narrative, which is really, really cool. And again, all this stuff is in the Game Master's Guide. So again, this is why the card deck is completely optional. But this gives you a nice little item to actually give to your player and have them hold on to. So I really like that. I think it adds a nice little bit of bonus extra to the game. And it is just a lot easier to keep track of. So that is that, and then you also have 8. Now I don't know if these are in the Game Master's Guide. Again, I just did a brief glance through the stuff, but there's 8 mounts, 2 wolf mounts for like halflings and goblins, and they have their own unique names and stats. And then there's horse mounts. Obviously, there's 8 of them in total. They have their own, they have their own story. So again, you can put them into the game in your world, and they have their own stats. Because mounted combat is a thing in the game, and there's even a whole profession or class based behind being a rider, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that is that. So yeah, super, super cool deck of cards. Again, entirely optional, so don't feel the need to have to buy it. But I think I think it's a really, really nice deck of cards. I'm gonna be really looking forward to actually like being able to hand out a super awesome, cool, high quality card to my player, as opposed to printing off something or writing it down and giving it to them. And then next up we have the dice set. Again, this uses the Year Zero engine. So if you're familiar with their other games, you're going to be pretty familiar with this system. Obviously, it's modified, I believe. Again, this is the first Free League publishing game I've played. So if I get things wrong or whatever, please correct me in the comments below. But it uses a D6 system. It's not a D20 system. There you will occasionally use an 8, 10, and D12, but D6s are going to be your mainstay type of dice. And the biggest thing is you will need 3 different kinds of D6s. Again, they don't have to be like exactly 3 different sets or whatever, but as long as you have 3 different groupings of D6s that you can actually differentiate between, that's all you need in this game. So because you need something that represents your attributes, your gear, weapons and armor and shields, and even tools, as well as your skill dice. So the way this game works is sixes are successes. You can see the 6 on this dice has a little crossed sword symbol. That means a success. And the ones, they don't necessarily mean fails, but they are called banes in this game. And that generally means that something bad will happen when you roll those ones. So the way this game works, let's say I wanted to attack someone. Well, I would find the appropriate attribute, which would be strength generally. And I'll use the white dice to represent that. So I have 4 strength, so I roll 4 dice. Then I look at my skill that's associated with what I'm doing. So it'd be your melee skill, which, I have 3 in my melee, so I'll use 3 red dice. And then let's say my short sword, I don't know the exact stats, but let's say it has a +2 gear bonus. So I would roll 2 black dice. So I roll, and let's say I got this instead. So let's say I got this. I got one success on my attribute dice, and I did roll 2 ones. But in your first roll, and we'll get to that, why it's a first roll in a bit. Those are irrelevant. I got one 6. Awesome. That means I succeeded in my action. It's a very, very easy and simple system, and there's not a lot of modifiers you have to worry about, like in something like D&D and stuff like that, which means I really, really like it. It's nice and quick. It obviously takes a little while to get used to if you are coming from D&D, but once you get used to it, I think it will be a lot more streamlined. And I really like the way they do it. It's just nice and simple. But the unique thing about this game is that you can actually push your roll. And when you push your roll, it allows you to re-roll to potentially either fix a failure, which means you didn't get any 6s, or you want to get more 6s or successes. Because if you get more successes, depending on the action, you better things might happen. Like in melee, you will essentially be doing more damage the more successes you roll. So let's say I wanted to actually try and re-roll, so I decided to push my roll. So that means I will re-roll all my dice that aren't 6s and 1s. And I think you re-roll all the dice that aren't 6s or 1s. I could be wrong about that. Again, I only did a brief glance through the stuff, but if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. So I would re-roll all these other dice. I would leave my 1s and leave my 6s, because now in my pushed roll, because it represents me sort of exerting myself and pushing harder, I will be hurting myself or damaging my weapon in some way. So I re-roll, and in my re-roll, I end up getting this. So awesome. I still succeeded. And obviously you can't fail a push roll if you've succeeded in the first roll, because you leave your 6s in your first roll. So I re-roll, and I got 2 more successes. Awesome. I did more damage, but because I pushed my roll, my 1s are now activated. My banes are now activated. So that's why you need three different kinds of dice to represent your stuff, because depending on which dice you rolled 1s on, you will be injuring yourself or hindering yourself in some way. The only difference is on skill dice, which is why it's good to have high skill in certain things. You actually 1s don't count for your skill dice, so that's good. But I got a 1 on my weapon dice and or my gear dice, and I got a 1 on my attribute dice. So I would actually take 1 strength damage, and I would also lower my gear bonus on my sword by 1. So next time I roll with my melee attack, I would only roll 3 dice because my strength goes down to 3, and I would only roll 1 dice because my weapon's getting a little bit more degraded. So it's a nice, simple, quick way to do things. I like how there's not a lot to keep track of. But because you're taking strength damage, you are getting weaker. And your attributes or your stats are actually your health in this game, which I really like. I really love that. I like how there actually is not a health pool in this game. There's no health pool. There's no arbitrary number to represent your status. Because when you think about it, the hit point pool is pretty arbitrary. Like it doesn't really represent a whole lot in Dungeons and Dragons. Regardless of whether you're at full health or if you have 2 health, you are able to swing your axe at full strength and full speed and like still do max damage. Nothing really changes on that end. I like how in this game it's a little bit more grounded and it makes sense for what it represents. So like the weaker that you get in the strength stat, the less and the weaker that the weaker that you're going to be doing with your swords and your weapons. Because there's 4 different stats in the game. There's strength, agility, wits, and empathy. And depending on, and you can get damaged in every single one of those stats in different ways. And if any of them hits 0, you're considered broken. And bad things will happen when you're broken. You're not dead, but you are broken in some way until you get healed. And there are ways to get killed in this game. It's a much more brutal style of game. Character death is much more expected, which I think is another again, I didn't grow up during Dungeons and Dragons first edition, but I believe that's sort of what it was back in the day. From what I read, is that character deaths, characters were a lot more expendable, which is why the Legends and Adventurers booklet that's in the core set, it allows you to actually, if you want to, rather than traditionally make your character from the ground up, piece by piece, you just roll dice, and you can roll up a full character with like a full background, talents, and stats and stuff like that. And it's a really, really cool way. And the tables in this game are super, super in depth. Again, I guess tables are another big thing of the old school style of gaming. They got a ton of cool tables to roll on, and it's just the ability to roll a character up really, really quickly because death is a lot more frequent. Combat is not going to be the biggest thing in this game. Combat is obviously a mainstay of any RPG, really, but you are expected to try and play a little bit smarter, play dirty if you have to, and it rewards that kind of play. Again, you aren't the heroes being in some epic fantasy adventure. You are rogues and raiders in a cursed world. So yeah, I really love their system. Obviously, there are some downsides to it, I'm sure. But again, without playing the system, I can't really speak fully on the pros and cons. But at a cursory glance, I really, really love how they do things. Sorry, it needs water. Water. All right, and then next up, this is an optional thing, which is the Raven's Purge book. You can get the Raven bundle, which will include this and every single optional thing. But the Raven's Purge is an epic campaign module. So this is sort of just a traditional campaign module that's similar to like any D&D module you can get, which will have its own sort of contained story and stuff like that. The difference between Dungeons and Dragons and this game, though, is this game is very much, again, like a sandbox style survival game. So because you're playing on the Hex Grid, what drives the story are the adventure locations you're going to be visiting in the world and exploring the world through that sense. The way this campaign module works is you can complete it sort of non-linearly. Obviously, you want to do the final one last, the final adventure zone, because it's considered the finale. But everything before that, the players can just go wherever, because it's just a big collection of adventure zones with its own characters and story. But you can seamlessly integrate it into just your basic Forbidden Lands world, just by placing adventure zones wherever you want, and then using the legends to help influence and drive your players towards certain focal points on the map. But yeah, it has everything you need, with like its own legends and character stuff, stats, monsters, puzzles, and yeah, it's just I haven't really looked through this one yet, but again, it's its own crazy awesome story, written by acclaimed fantasy author Eric Grunstrom. Again, I'm not familiar with Swedish work, but if that name sounds familiar to you, you might want to pick up the campaign module. So that is that. And then the Game Master's Guide. This art was the Raven's Purge art, or so not Game Master's Guide. This is the Game Master's screen. It's a nice, really small sized screen. It's not too large, not too big. Or sorry, not too small, not too big. But I love the art in this. And as with any GM screen, you're going to be having a lot of helpful tool tips, which will be great for me because, again, as for a new player, this will be awesome. Since I'm unfamiliar with their system, and it'll help out a lot, make things a lot more streamlined, because no one likes having to wait for the GM or DM to skim through the rule book for stuff. All right, so let's get to the main meat and potatoes. So this is going to be the core set. Again, this is going to be the main thing you need if you want to play this game. Everything I listed before is completely optional. Also, I just realized I did not list the prices for any of the stuff, even though I said I was going to. Let's do that quickly. So the dice set that I showed, if you want to buy that, it's $31 Canadian off the Modifius website. And if you want to buy it off the main Free League Publishing website, it's about $21 US. I'll say one thing, though, and even the developers have said this, you will be rolling a lot more dice than what I showed. So you will need to either buy 2 or potentially 3 sets of the dice if you only want to use their custom dice. But if you're a tabletop role player, you should like me, you should have access to a bajillion sets of dice. So you really don't need to. The custom dice set, I think, are the least optional thing you really need in the game. But they're really, really nice dice. And it is nice that they do show the amount of successes on each dice. It's sort of a nice little bonus, but that's probably the least required thing you need out of the optional stuff. For the Ravens Purge booklet, if you buy it off the main freely publishing website, it's about $30 US. Off the Modifius website, it is going to be $48 Canadian. And they also do have another sort of, it's not a campaign module, but it is a set of 4 different adventure zones that you can place in your world called the Spire of Quetzal. And that's a sort of a scenario compendium booklet or book that they released pretty recently, and that's about $33 Canadian. Or if you want to get it off the main website, it's about $21 US. I ordered that one separately, and that's currently on the way. So I don't have that one to show you guys, but that's on their store as well. The Game Master screen, it's about $34 Canadian off the Modifius website, and off the Free League Publishing website, it's about $30 US. So that one's actually a little bit closer in price. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. On the Free League Publishing website, it's about $20 US. I apologize. For a lot of the stuff as well, for like the core books, you can buy them in PDF format. Obviously, it's just going to be a lot cheaper. But when I show you guys the hard, physical copies, it might change your mind because it's freaking amazing quality and I love it. But again, obviously, if you're playing like online with friends, then you don't need this stuff physically wise, unless you just want it for your collection. But you can see here, right off the bat, the books just scream quality, and I really am impressed with how amazing these look and feel, considering the price that you get. So, Player's Handbook, Game Master's Guide, as well as you get your Legends and Adventurers booklet. A little bit unfortunate they didn't make this into a book, but obviously this was one of their milestone things on their Kickstarter to make this, and considering the size, like it doesn't really need its own crazy hardcover book anyways. But this is going to be what you're using to roll up adventurers if you want to do that style of character creation, as well as for the Game Master to roll up random legends. And again, just so you can, this is the best way to sort of get a taste for how their tables look. Tables upon tables, and they're just super, super in-depth to make characters easily. Amazing art. And then also for crazy, crazy in-depth ways to get your legends up and running just on the fly. Yeah, just so many different facets. It goes through every single thing. So it makes it really, really easy for you as the GM to do stuff, as well as there's even a monster generator that can do every single aspect to make things on the fly. I love it. It's just, they do a really, really good job of making some easy to follow tables so you can do things quickly and efficiently. Because again, no one likes to just sit there and wait for the GM and DM to do stuff silently. So there's that. There's also the stickers for the Hex Grid Map, which is underneath here. If I can get it. God. All right. Trying to place this stuff so I don't damage anything, obviously. So this is going to be the Hex Grid map. So this map is going to be what you're using. Obviously, it's not this small. I'm not going to unfold it fully. This is only about the quarter of the size of the map. So it's a very, very large map with a lot of hexes on it to travel on. So it'll take your players a long time to get through this map to actually, if they want to explore every single location. And obviously, it's infinite amount of content, because if you want, you as the GM or DM can be putting your own adventure zones in here and just keep creating interesting things for your players to do and evolve the world over time. And you can see there's like actual locations on the map that have different buildings, castles, and like focal points that your players can follow along with to help drive the exploration forward. And these are the places that you can sort of roll up a random adventure for your players and place them on these locations. So not only does it give a visual indicator of where your players might want to go, through the legends and the rumors and the things you do in the world, you can use that to influence your players thematically as well and narratively. So yeah, I really love the map. Super awesome, colorful, high quality map. And they do have a map in the Game Master's Guide that shows this map, but also with the different factions and races that are generally in each area, and that just helps with sort of the world building and stuff like that. I'm not gonna go too crazy into the lore in this game. There's a huge amount of history of the world in the Game Master's Guide, but just as a brief idea of what you're going to be doing as a player in this game, this is the Forbidden Lands, and it used to be run by elves and dwarves. Humans essentially invaded, a bunch of wars and stuff like that. Crazy stuff happened with the gods, but amongst that, something called the Blood Mist came about, and that filled the whole land. No one knows why, but it halted exploration because you couldn't go out for a day's travel without just running into the Blood Mist and getting killed. If you went into the Blood Mist, you died. That's all pretty much anyone knows. No one knows what it actually was or whatever. So that lasted for like 300 years. Suddenly, the blood mist lifts, and no one really knows why. And then 5 years later, that's where your game starts. It's around 5 years after the blood mist lifts. Obviously, you can change that if you want to as a GM. But in the main book, that's sort of what it says. And sort of that's what sets the tone. It's like the blood mist is finally lifted. People are free to explore, trade with other factions across the land that they weren't able to get to before, and no one knows how the world has changed really. And it's up to you as the players to just go out and explore the world, make your mark, build a stronghold, and just do whatever you want to do. It's a very sandbox survival style of game. And it's very much the GM or DM is going to be reacting to what the players do, as opposed to like Dungeons and Dragons, where usually you'll have the GM or DM build like an epic campaign before you and have like a general idea of where the story is going to go. In this game, it's very much like the GM or DM, like they even list in the Game Master's Guide, like you should be doing little to no prep with this game. A lot of the stuff can be done on the fly, as well as you'll just be doing like a little bit of preparation just for the surrounding areas, just in case like your players do want to go to certain locations. You'll at least be ready for that. But in terms of which order they go to, that's entirely up to them. So yeah, super high quality map. Now in terms of the player's handbook and game master's guide, I'll just open it briefly and give you a feel for it. But you can see here with the art and like the material with it, this is very much the style of like, I apologize for the glare. You can really just see the quality. It's a very well laid out book. I found it really easy to just sort of glance through. A lot of amazing art in this game. Again, it might not be your kind of art. I know a lot of people don't really like sort of the old school hand-drawn style. But again, this whole game is really supposed to be like an old school throwback in a modern package. But very cool. A lot of information to just be able to create your characters pretty easily. I didn't really have trouble creating some mock-up characters. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot less to worry about than in D&D, which makes it a lot easier to get into for new players who aren't familiar with tabletop role-playing games. Because I find Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition can be a little bit overwhelming for someone because there's so many options to choose from. There's still a ton of depth in this game. There's around like 40 general talents, and that's going to be what makes your character fairly unique, is being able to pick from those pool of talents on top of profession specific talents, and you also have a racial talent. So there's a lot of depth, but it's very easy to get through. Again, they have some traditional fantasy stuff, but they have like Wolfkin, for example, which is like a playable race, and goblins also are one of the more unique races where you generally don't play those as a D&D player. Which is very cool. So they have like some interesting takes on fantasy. Like even professions or classes. They have like rider again, which is like a mounted class, and peddler, which is like someone who can really do well with social conflicts and trade and stuff like that. And all that stuff is really important when you're playing something like a survival sandbox game, because this game does reward more jack of all trades and a more well-rounded character. Where in D&D, if you're coming from D&D where you're a little bit more specific and like you have a little bit more of a specific role you're fulfilling, and you're gonna have an expertise in something as opposed to being a lot more well-rounded. If you're coming from that side and you try to build someone who's just only focused on combat or only focused on social conflicts, you're gonna actually have a much worse time in this game. And you're gonna be, depending on what situations you find yourself in, you could get severely punished for that. So they have a lot of cool takes on that. And even with the races, thematically in the world, they have a lot of things that twist things on their head. For example, orcs are actually like freed slaves that were slaved under the elves and dwarves. And there's even a note for playing as an orc that, like, you know, they're considered hated and feared by pretty much all the other kin, which are the races in the game. So if you play an orc, it might be best to talk with your group first before choosing that one. And even halflings. You know, halflings are considered like the super happy, jovial class. or jovial race in traditional fantasy. In this game, they are considered jovial and happy and bubbly, but that's only a facade. When they go home, they're like puking in their flower beds, they're beating their children, they're alcoholics, and you can sort of tell just by the description of the halfling. It's a very much a darker world. And even interesting enough, that the goblins are actually the relatives of the halflings in this world, which I found sort of interesting. But yeah, they have their traditional stuff though. They have like dwarves and half elves and elves and humans. And yeah, but a lot of interesting stuff as well, and even professions. Um, but what I like about here is that it's not like going to be shoehorning you into a lot of stuff, especially considering there's like really not any racial bonuses that you get. Like ability and stat wise, there's no bonuses you get from picking a certain race. There is like a key attribute that you want to focus on, and that lists all the important information here, and traditional names if you want to go that way. The only thing you get that's specific to the kin is their talent. Like it'll list like a typical profession, but there's no mechanics in the game where it's like, in D&D, you will have stats and abilities that affect you for choosing that race, which will actually influence you a little bit in what race you choose for which class. In this game, you can make anything. You can make a wolfkin sorcerer, you can make a halfling fighter, and not be really affected stat wise. Which I love. I love how it allows a little bit more freedom, I guess, in that sense, without hindering you too much. So yeah, it's gonna go through all that stuff, and it'll go through some of the mechanics for obviously building your character and choosing talents. What I like though is a lot of the stuff is grounded. So like age, for example, age actually does have an effect on your ability to create characters. And I do like how they represent it. So like the younger that you are, the more attributes you'll get access to spend on your stuff, because you will be younger, you'll be healthier, and yeah, so on and so forth. So like young people get 15 attribute points to allocate between their attributes. Old people only get 13. But old people will have more skill points and talents to choose from, because they are more experienced. They have more experience in the world, so they're able to do more things. I really like that, and it's not game breaking. Like, it's not a dramatic amount that you get to change from, but it does still influence your stuff. And like with any tabletop role playing game, you can obviously homebrew stuff if you want to. And of course, it goes over gear, and like it goes over like more flavorful stuff, like your dark secret or your relationships between other characters, which are actually pretty important in the game mechanic wise. And it goes over all your basic rules for consumables and gold and currency and all that good stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of these like tool tips that are placed around in the world to sort of make things easy for players to just get the cliff notes from. But from what I can see, like there's just a easy amount of stuff. Like here's a lot of the talents. You can see there's just a ton of talents. Like there's all the profession and race talents that you can choose from. And this whole page right here are general talents that everyone can choose from. And that's going to be what really separates your character and makes them unique. Additionally, with the way experience goes in this game, I like how they do it where it's not like a milestone and you get like a bunch of random stuff. Well, a bunch of not random stuff, but a bunch of stuff. Like you'll hit 500 experience in D&D, and you'll get like level 2, 3,000 experience. 3,000 experience, you'll hit level 3, and get access to a bunch of stuff like per milestone. I do like in this game, experience-wise, depending on what you did in that session, you get a certain amount of experience, and you can use that experience right away to turn that into buying talents and leveling up talents, and doing things that way. And that's a lot more rewarding, that you're going to be able to pretty much do something to your character and improve your character in some way every single session. I do like that. And you're constantly improving over time, as opposed to just waiting like per milestone type of thing. Another thing as well is there's no levels in this game. I should probably mention that. You're not going to be you're leveling like horizontally rather than vertically. So in D&D, you're going to be getting like incrementally more powerful the higher level that you are. In this game, because your attributes, which are like your strength, your wits, empathy, and agility, after character creation, those don't change at all. You can't improve those in any single way. So that part is really important to make sure you create your character in that sense, in the way that you envision. But that means everyone's a little bit on a more even playing field, as well as you can get access to a bunch of these talents and stuff, and this is going to be how you're essentially leveling. Is you're going to be growing like with more options rather than just getting more powerful. More options will be available to you the stronger that you get. So I like that. And every single talent has 3 ranks in it. So there is a shit ton of depth to this game in terms of building characters and making them unique. So I really like that, even though on the surface, at first glance, it might seem a little bit too simple. Trust me, there's still a lot to worry about. And obviously goes over combat and damage and all that stuff. Again, we're not going to do a deep dive into mechanics, but just going over the book. There's like diseases and stuff like that. There's environmental effects and stuff you have to worry about there. Magic, I will say, there's 2 magic professions in the game. There's druid and sorcerer. Magic is actually considered very rare. Well, not very rare, but magic is considered rare in this game, and also considering it's a low fantasy setting, it's also very risky to use magic in this game. It's extremely powerful, but those banes that I was talking about when you were rolling your d6, if you roll ones, there is a random table in this game where you have to roll in the magic mishap table. So if you are someone who loves using magic, this game is much more like again, the old school style of stuff like sword and sorcery, where it should be expected that the magic classes will also be swinging their sword and using a shield and stuff like that. So everyone's going to be fighting. It's just that magic users do get a little bit of extra spice on their character, but it does come to an extra risk with potentially dying. Yes, you can die. Again, if you're not a fan of insta-death stuff with your random table, it is a very low chance, but there is still always a chance. I personally love that as someone who plays Kingdom Death. I love random injury tables and random effect tables. This game is full of them. If you love random tables and random encounters, you're going to love this game. And speaking of random encounters, this game does them the best from what I can see. Traditionally in D&D, a lot of the random encounters I find are going to be like, random encounter, you will, I don't know, spawn D6 wolves. In this game, you do have a random encounter table, but every single one of them has flavor text, sets up the story really well, and sort of what it does in an actual game. And I love how every single one is unique. Everyone has the ability to grow into an even larger story at your GM's discretion. And they do even have ways in this game, depending on the random encounter, where it's like when you're exploring the world and you roll an encounter for the first time, something happens. If you roll the same encounter the next time, the players meet up with the NPC or whatever monster, something different will happen. And so some of those encounters are like that. But I do love the fact that they are actually unique encounters. They're not just generic spawn X amount of enemies type of thing. I love that. And there's a lot of them. There's a healthy amount. I think it's around 43 or something like that. But on top of that, again, with how the random tables are, you can see, again, how in-depth the tables are in the Game Master's Guide. And there's just tables upon tables for developing dungeons, adventure zones, castles, ruins, villages, NPCs. And they're very, very well made. I really, really love it. And this is also stuff that you can easily use for your other games, which I like. You can just modify it a little bit, and they're just extremely well-made tables that you could just throw into other stuff. And that's why it sort of goes on that, again, idea that you aren't supposed to do a ton of prep. The prep that you will be doing is like looking at your surrounding areas that your players might travel to, prepare a little bit of stuff for those areas, and roll up some stuff before the session, and you're good to go. You don't have to spend hours upon hours like meticulously building stuff from the ground up. Obviously, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. It's just it is nice for people like myself who don't have a lot of time to dedicate to that kind of stuff, and you can do things a lot quicker and more efficiently, and not feel like you are sacrificing on quality. Because again, with how in depth these tables go, it's pretty damn impressive. I did not expect that personally. And then the last bit of the Game Master's Guide obviously is going to go through the rules and stuff like that, but you do get the adventure zones. I think you get three or four adventure zones with the base game, and that's just to sort of get you started. So adventure zones are what you consider like the major villages, cities, dungeons, ruins that will have a bunch of different locations within it to actually explore. And every single one of those has its own number and NPC tied to it sometimes, monster, puzzle, whatever, even combat encounters. So adventure zones are going to be the main bulk of your content. And yeah, this game does come with some of them. And again, with the Legends and Adventurers booklet, that's going to be another thing that you can use alongside the Game Master's Guide to just make up those adventure zones on the fly. You just have to sort of give them their own unique flair. But yeah, it goes over like every single main NPC and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. And those artifact cards, what I was talking about earlier, that's at the end of the book. And you can see that all the information for the artifacts are listed here. But the cards are a nice touch to actually give your player characters something to hold on to. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Again, I don't want to make this video any longer than it already is because it's gotten incredibly long. But this video could have been even longer. Like, there's so many things I could talk about this game just as a first cursory glance and a first impressions. But I'm thoroughly impressed with this product. I am so excited to run it. I will probably make a video on my thoughts about it when I actually do get into the deep end of actually playing it, but I really like how the mechanics are laid out. Again, we didn't really deep dive into the survival stuff a lot, or even like the stronghold mechanics as a whole mechanics and rules based around strongholds with, like, depending on your reputation, you might have other factions come and attack you. You might have people visit your stronghold. You can hire servants and guards and have epic battles like Lord of the Rings style against your stronghold, where like factions might try and wait you out and starve you. Like there's so much in this game, and the fact that it's all there just to play like right off the bat without even you as a GM having to make a lot of unique content, I really love that. So that's going to be it. That's sort of my first impressions of Forbidden Lands, sort of what I think about it and what I'm excited about. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty excited to run this. I think there's a lot of stuff that I like over D&D. Not like I don't like D&D. Obviously, I love D&D, but I like how there's quite a bit that's different with it being like such a different system. And I've never really run a different system before. Our group did try Shadowrun at some point. It didn't really work out. That one's a lot more complicated than this game. I do like how simple this game looks, obviously, but still having like a ton of depth. I do love that. I still want options. I still want depth, but I do like how it comes with a little bit more simplicity than some other games that I've seen. So that's Forbidden Lands. Again, I say if you're into pen and paper tabletop role-playing games, you might want to take a look at this one. And just a reminder, you can actually download a free quick start PDF to this game to get you started playing right away with your friends. Off the Free League Publishing main website. So that's going to do it for me, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys got through it all, man, bless your heart. I'm impressed. And yeah, that's going to do it for that. I will get some timestamps up. I mean, obviously, if you're at the end of the video, it doesn't matter, but I should have said at the start that I'll get timestamps for like all the different items. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you guys check out the links in the description below. If anything, at least follow my Twitter, because that's the best way to keep up to date on all things me. And thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.